So I wanted to start, Macarena, by asking you, how did you feel yesterday, and how do you feel today looking back at yesterday?
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, or good morning, I guess, everyone. Buenos dias. It was a great day. I want to thank you all who attended yesterday. We may have over-programmed a bit to end with an hour and a half film at the end of a long day. May have been overkill, but as you can tell, there's so much rich material, and I think we could have even had 5-6 days on this topic without a problem. I also wanted to thank Ashley Joyner of Queer Circle that I didn't get a chance to thank you yesterday for co-sponsoring the event. To me, the range of events that we saw yesterday really show the vibrancy of an imagination of queer ecologies, as we're kind of defining it, and also how to think together as artists, intellectuals, doers, makers, beers, performers, etc., and really, to me, to tighten the web between us, because I think we need to kind of think about an imaginary of queer potential for the future. I also really learned from what Rudy and Jacob were saying about the importance of finding something new in this particular framework. I had a really enlightening conversation with Rudy during our Chinese dinner last night. And they were really breaking down for me this fact that we need to make autonomous space in the face of authoritarian violence, in the face of this widening sea of reactionary political moment in the world. I do see that. I do think that in the Americas, some of the work that we were seeing by Seba, some of the work by Juan was really trying to create these imaginations. And in a moment when we see assemblies and a queering of the political in many ways, we also see an accumulation of wealth and resources put towards retroactive, anti-queer, anti-black, anti-brown activities, so xenophobic activities, and also kind of pushing back on the gains to protect the earth. Can I say a few more things? Okay. To me, I was thinking about the term the pluriversal that comes out of Indigenous communities. And I would say maybe now I'm thinking about like a queer plurivision, what that can be, rather than just appropriate or extract the concept of the pluriversal, but to say a plurivision, a queer plurivision, maybe one that's grounded in embodied politics and creative practice. And I was really thinking a lot about what we're doing here and rereading the materials last night. And it's not to provide a solutionist framework, right? It's not to think about, how to address alternatives and provide a solution in the collapsing world. And I think we saw in Francisco Salazar's film the ways in which perhaps that utopia that was presented in Antarctica was no utopia, especially for queers. The church was reified in Antarctica. It was a space of whiteness, of neo-nationalisms, of heteropatriarchy. And so while there was a really beautiful framework with this queer Maori protagonist that was thinking about other spaces, I think there were also elements of it that I want to trouble and continue to think with. So let's see. The other thing that the film raised for me, there was this discussion of Marisol de la Cadena's work, which is really beautiful. If you haven't read it, it's called Earth Being. And Juan had talked to me, and I don't know if it made it into the interview, but about ice beings, and that over the course of the time that Juan has gone to this space of Antarctica that actually calls us all, it's a kind of call to the imagination of the elsewhere, right? That Antarctica in some ways, he's seen these ice beings melting. And so Antarctica is a space of obviously ice cores, where the measurement of climate, et cetera. So it is a unique space in that way. And I just wanted to kind of remind us of its uniqueness. The other thing I wanted to bring forward, I think that often translation is difficult. So what it means to bring someone like Seba in this space and think about the full context of Wallmapu, the indigenous territory that crosses Chile and Argentina. We can't get that full context, I think. I think performance needs certain kinds of context. And certainly, I'm not sure if you all know, but we know about the Zapatistas, the uprising in 1994, the kind of moment in Chiapas, but we don't know about all of the war. It's a war that's going on against indigenous peoples in that territory. and it's fully militarized with Israeli tanks, and it's supported by the Chilean state. And I think I just wanted to make that point. Seba's performance comes out of those territories of struggle where he kept mentioning Mapuche women who invented the term terracidio, terracide, and that I think is important to mention as well, that kind of important theoretical productivity and performative productivity. So I think the last thing I'll say to the question is I really appreciated all of these incredible performances. Hans, Jacob, Rudy, Adham, and Seba. I look forward to Adham's performance today. I look forward to your keynote, Jack, and everything that day two will bring us. And I'm also really grateful for the powerful ethereal music of Bones and Magda yesterday. That was a beautiful moving moment for me. It was literally performing this kind of what it means to be submerged in the senses, in the sonic, in the waves of the liquid acoustic, which I think we'll experience much more today with Javi, P-Staff, and Ash. So thank you everyone for being here, and onward to day two, and to queerly living with this heat wave and surfing in the undercurrents. So thank you.
Thanks, Macarena. Jack, what did you think of yesterday?
Yeah, I thought it was a great beginning. It was exhausting, which is it was a very typical Serpentine marathon. I mean, you don't need to bring the marathon back. We're in it, you know. We were here for 8 hours, and we had incredible performances one after the other, and then ended the night with this incredible experimental film that lasted for an hour and a half, you know, and really deserved a fuller audience than we could manage at that point. But it tells us something also about human attention spans in the era of social media, how vexed and anxious we are about climate change, but also potentially how little of our attention actually can go there at any given moment, because it is absolutely overwhelming. We're in a space that if the temperature went up 10 more degrees, we would actually have to leave. You know, the physical constraints on actually meeting are very real and very present, even as we address this sort of insurmountable, inevitable collapse and crisis. Pick up on something that Maka said. It's tempting, you know, to stay with performance and stay with a sort of entertainment route to thinking about climate change. And dreary as it may be to wheel in the academics or any kind of intellectual analysis, it is so important to realize that we are without a language for, you know, amelioration of the conditions under which we live. And the political languages that are on offer to us from mainstream sources are just completely and utterly inadequate. So on the one hand, art is able to give us access to other languages. In Maka's piece, she experimented going back and forth with, you know, incredible elegance between memoir and analysis. There'd be a memoiristic piece, and then we would zoom out to an analysis of the river as a colonial route of trade and transmission and extraction, right? That kind of ability to telescope in and out, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, is absolutely key. We have to focus in on individual issues, but we have to be able to zoom out to take in not just the largest scale problem, but the way in which those problems have been framed under the heading of world, and then solutions have been offered that come out of the very political system that has created the crisis in the first place. That can't work. That cannot work. So we're here under the guidance of the Serpentine to think about the ways in which art offers us another set of responses to climate change than those that are being offered by mainstream politics, which are wholly inadequate, mostly negligent, often willfully dangerous, and cannot serve this particular moment. Like Maka, I, you know, having put my time in at the end of a very long day to watch Nightfall on Gaia, I was both amazed, and most of you weren't here for it, but it is an hour and a half long film that is both telling the story of a kind of futuristic sci-fi moment when an indigenous Maori microbiologist is making some kind of investigation that ends disastrously into the Antarctic landscape. And there's an ethnography of people who are doing research in Antarctica. And it's kind of an amazing film visually, but politically, it is the same old narrative about finding solutions to climate crisis in the family, in the church, in a kind of settler colonial mentality. And therefore, we were just returned to this idea that in the face of crisis, go inwards, turn to the family. And of course, for queers and for trans people, this is an absolutely bankrupt solution. For me, the best moment in the film was when there was a sort of settler moment of a research team unloading its equipment onto the ice, and a quizzical penguin watching the arrival of these aliens. And the shot went on for like 10 minutes. I mean, it was way longer than it needed to be. We would have gotten the point, but I was happy to stay with the attention of the penguin. And the penguin became more and more agitated and more curious and worried about the arrival of people who seemed to need so much equipment to be on the ice, where that penguin was just standing in its feathers. I think penguins have feathers, do they? Or is it something else? Let's say they have feathers. Anyway, this sort of pelagic puzzlement was really, it was really like compelling. I could have stayed with the penguin for another half an hour. And we will think today, later on, I'm going to try and introduce some of this material then about animal spectatorship to the disaster of human decline, and what we might learn from that. Marcus suggested yesterday that one solution to the problem of water pollution lies with the oyster, and the way in which oysters are able to clean enormous amounts of water very quickly. And there's a sense at this moment that we need to turn the tables away from human solutions towards solutions that animals anyway come up with to toxins in their environmental spaces. So that was sort of it. I thought Seba's gorgeous performance at the beginning, as Marcus said, really alerted us to the way in which many of these struggles that we cast as global have been addressed and opposed by indigenous groups for decades. And there's a way in which Euro-American projects are in a catch-up mode. So yeah, excited today to move from spaces of sort of, in a way, the rural or something that we vaguely recognize as nature, into the urban, into architectures, into soundscapes that queer people produce and inhabit, and also into new vocabularies in which we figure out how to take everything apart.
Great. I'm also excited that we're going to start by a performance by Banu Capio, and she's joined by the collective Metamorphosis. It's a performance based on her book, Humanimal, a project for future children. So this idea of futurity and children really interests me because the book is inspired by the story of the two Bengali wolf girls who were raised by wolves and then recuperated to society. Right. And there's a lot of interesting moves that I think today we'll make, because we'll see, I'm curious to see what ferality and wildness means for Banu and in another part of the world. And then Banu, of course, wanted to collaborate with Metamorphosis. I was like, of course, let's open up the stage and bring more people in. And then we'll end with Adham, who was in conversation yesterday with Seba. And then we'll see what their work is doing with liquidity and rivers, and also addressing the very place that we're in right now, which was first a church, then a queer nightclub for 2 decades, and here we are in the middle of a heat wave with bodies again together. So, Macarena, what are you excited to see today, or what are you expecting that today will do?
Yeah, I mean, I do think what Jack said is so important about moving in really different geographies and bringing back the urban. And what these different spaces can say to each other. I think that's really exciting. I mentioned the acoustics already. I am actually very excited to hear Jack's piece. I'm curious about a couple of his theoretical propositions, and I just think it's going to be a great second day to round out this long collaboration with you, Kostas. So thank you for everything. Yeah.
Let the fun begin.
Thank you both. I'll see you later.
Okay.